Alright, I wanted to save this for last, and I'm going to talk a little bit about white witchcraft, which people think means good witchcraft or people using magical spells for good instead of evil. First, there is no such thing as good witchcraft. The power that comes along with witchcraft is always designed for selfish people to manipulate or destroy other people. The truth about white witchcraft is that it is the highest level of witchcraft because it contains the most evil people who have perfected hiding what they truly are. A lot of them look like regular good guys. They're good looking. They look like regular people who you'll never think practice witchcraft. So a giant part of the manipulation and takeover of society by a pedophile death cult is the cover-up and hiding of what they really are. So a huge amount of their power is spent on covering up what they are. So, like I said in the report on Wicca, the most evil witches on the planet hide behind very prestigious organizations, and this most frequently are churches and the military. That's their cover. They're religious leaders. They're in the media. They're in the military. They're pillars of society. So this is why you'll hear so many reports about different churches and temples with clergy members who are abusing children. And often you will hear the children reporting that Satanism is being secretly practiced at these churches and temples. So to better explain white witchcraft, let me start by giving you a couple of examples from some movies that contain something along the lines of white witchcraft that we could all relate to. First, we'll start with The Wizard of Oz. So Dorothy is in her house that is caught in a tornado that rips it up and takes her from Kansas to the land of Oz, where the house falls out of the sky and lands on a wicked witch. So she kills one of the witches who control Oz. And then the Munchkin people who live in Oz all come out of their houses, and they are all very happy with Dorothy, who has killed one of the witches. Now, who is the first to show up and resume control of the situation now that Dorothy has killed one of the wicked witches? That would be the White Witch, of course. And if you really think about it, this White Witch was allowing the Wicked Witch to do whatever she wanted to the people before Dorothy arrived and killed the Wicked Witch. So the White Witch was most likely in the same coven as the Wicked Witch, and they worked together to maintain control of Oz. So some of the witches in the local coven will play like they are good, and some of the witches will not hide that they're evil. So it's the whole good cop, bad cop thing. So as I reported in the documentary on Wicca, Wiccans use the 4 directions in their rituals. So in the land of Oz, there was the Wicked Witch of the East, Wicked Witch of the West, then there's the White Witch, who was probably from the north, and then who was the last witch? From the south. Well, that would be the Wizard of Oz. And in reality, he is probably worse than all the other witches that control Oz, because he is in charge of them and uses the other witches to control Oz with fear, so that he can pretend that he is the good guy. And the next example is the more modern movie series of Star Wars. Now, I bet everyone could guess who the White Witch was in Star Wars. That would be the evil Emperor. So at first, he was introduced as this regular-looking, old, distinguished type guy who was a senator in the government, and no one had any idea that he was a Sith Lord. Even the Jedi thought he was a good guy, and they had to save him at one point when he was abducted by the Empire. But as the Jedi say, the dark side of the Force clouds everything, and they will do this by using white witchcraft, the most evil and high-level form of witchcraft in the world. So you must understand that white and black witchcraft are always interlocked and always work hand in hand. So let me show a real quick clip of an example of white and black witchcraft. The first is a woman who I could tell is a witch, but she is passing herself off as a Christian preacher, which is quite common. So she is practicing white witchcraft to hide what she is and to control a group of people who are her followers. And after that, the next clip is a lady who is obviously practicing witchcraft, and she is making no effort to hide what she is. So she is definitely in your face and practicing black witchcraft. Now if you look at the cover of the book Wicca for Beginners, like most of mainstream Wicca, they're using white witchcraft here. It's the color blue and it doesn't come off as threatening at all. But if you were to read it very carefully, like I did in the report on Wicca, you would begin to notice the dark side is obviously prevalent all throughout this book. So it is definitely white witchcraft. Now look at the cover of The Devil's Notebook, written by Anton LaVey. And he is also the author of The Satanic Witch. So this book cover is a little more obvious. It is a black and red book with a red pentagram on the front with the satanic goat head representing Baphomet. And if you show this to most people, they will equate it with something on the dark side. So it is obviously black witchcraft. But if you were to read this book, you'll see that it contains similar stuff as the book Wicca for Beginners, in that it is an attempt to normalize the occult. Only The Devil's Notebook is more of a philosophy of satanic thought, which paints Satanism as a religion for the thinking man who has grown disillusioned with mainstream religions. So if you get past the cover, inside you will read a form of white witchcraft that whitewashes Satanism as something like a cynical philosophy. However, both of these books will try to get you deeper into the occult, at first by normalizing it. So you could see how black witchcraft and white witchcraft are like two sides of the same coin that are constantly used together. And the same thing with these two books. And this is the cover to the book Santeria, African Magic in Latin America. And the cover looks like a festive religion. There's a Roman Catholic saint here. There's this real happy crowned Chango guy over there. There's a bowl of fruit, and some flowers, and strings of beads, and it all looks just very fun. So they're using white witchcraft to introduce Santeria. But if you were to carefully read this book, you'll see that it contains the same exact information as you will find in this book, Palo Mayombe, The Dark Side of Santeria. And you'll see that it makes no attempt to hide that it is black magic or black witchcraft. So let's talk a little bit about Santeria. And if you ask the witches, they will call this one of the African or Latin American traditions. It's a form of witchcraft. On page 11, under the title, What is Santeria?, the author explains that Santeria means the worship of the saints, and writes, when the Yorubas identified their African gods with the saints of the Catholic faith, the saints became invested with the same supernatural powers of the African deities. Or like we've learned by reading the book on Wicca, the demonic aliens do not care what you want to call them. They don't care what god you want to identify them with. You can identify them with any god you want, just so long as you worship them through ritual sacrifice. On page 12, Gonzalez Whippler says, a practitioner of Santeria, that is called a Santero, is initiated into the mysteries and rites of the Orisha he recognizes as his mother and father. So once again, they're using the word the mysteries and rites. So it's a secret society. Same as the European traditions, this is one of the South American traditions. Continuing with the quote, the modern Santero practices very nearly the same type of primitive magic as the old Yoruba priests. He is a zealous guardian of the African traditions and is notoriously uncommunicative about his beliefs and practices. End quote. This book explains how to do many spells, and there is a spell list on pages 154 through 169 that includes spells to dominate someone, to bring back a lover, to get married, to separate a man and a woman, to create differences between two people, to create hatred between a man and a woman, and there are several spells to attack enemies. So none of this is any good, even though the writer refers to this book as white magic on page 127. And on page 14, the author is discussing putting spells on someone, and he writes, quote, any of these materials can be used to bewitch their owner in a very real and effective way. For example, hair strands from the victim can be knotted together with hair from the person who is casting the spell as a bracelet. The bracelet is then worn for 9 days, all the while willing the victim to come to the magician or to bend to his or her desires." End quote. So the author is referring to people they cast spells on as victims, of course. And next, I'm going to show a couple photographs that were included in this book, Santeria, African Magic in Latin America. And you will see some strange photographs, including a witch's cauldron, a black magic amulet, and someone who appears to be missing the top part of his face and skull. And you can see some of the more heavy Santeria priests here. Just like in Wicca, they promote probably being fat and lazy. All the while they'll hack this guy's head off. This guy who looks like he's built like a Greek god will have his head hacked off. And this guy looks like Obama's little brother here from Latin America. And he looks a little bugged out. I don't know if he's being scared of doing whatever the coven wants, or he's about to get his head hacked off too. But the same exact stuff happens in countries all over the world, no matter what tradition these witches practice at. Alright, so I'm reading from page 60 of Santeria, African Magic in Latin America. When a Santero becomes possessed by his ruling Orisha, he takes upon the characteristics attributed to that deity. A woman possessed by Chango adopts masculine attitudes. The female initiates of the Orisha often wear pantaloons under their skirts, because when they become possessed by the thunder god, they often tear their skirts off or lift them up over their heads. This is a typical action of Chango, who is very virile and does not like skirts on a body he is occupying, however temporarily. Once Chango has taken possession of a body, he wants to eat and drink all his special foods. After Chango has eaten and drank to his satisfaction, he turns his attention upon the audience, who then ask his advice on their problems and question him about all their pressing affairs. The behavior of the Omo Orisha tells the experienced Santeros whether the possession is real or assumed. Any pretentious make-believe is ignored contemptuously by the Santeros. In Cuba, false possessions were punished with a severe beating with a leather crop. As a result, most possessions were genuine. The Omo Orisha loses all consciousness during a possession, and his personality disappears to be replaced by that of the god. A truly possessed Omo Orisha feels no pain and could drink boiling oil from his cupped hands without burning himself. I have seen someone possessed by Chango bang her head against a wall with such violence that I felt sure that she would get a brain concussion, but she woke up from her possession perfectly refreshed without even a shadow of a headache. A possessed Omo Orisha can predict the future with uncanny accuracy and often describe scenes taking place thousands of miles away, as if he were able to see across time and space. Most of the time, other Orishas come to the tambor to help a god or goddess celebrate their birthday. They all joke and dance together and have a great time, often at the expense of one of those present at the party, at the ritual. Then in chapter 7, entitled Black Magic, Brujeria, the author spells it out for you with this line, and I quote, "Generally the Santeros deal only with white magic, that is, the type of natural magic used for cures, love spells, protection against enemies, good luck, and so forth. It is not frequently used to attack, cripple, or kill. These activities are connected with black magic or brujeria." Yet then the writer goes on to teach the practices of Palo Mayombe, or black magic, including the same exact information that you could find in this book, Palo Mayombe. So Santeria contains the same information on Palo Mayombe as a book on Palo Mayombe. So as you could see, white magic of Santeria and black magic of Palo Mayombe are both the same, yet one has been whitewashed and the other hasn't.